Hey everyone and welcome. We all hear about the cloud, but what happens when it actually fails? Well, a single technical error just sent Microsoft's entire cloud service into a global meltdown, and it took huge chunks of the internet right down with it. So today, we're going to break down exactly what happened. It's a question that feels more and more real, doesn't it? Our daily lives, our jobs, our entertainment, so much of it depends on just a handful of these massive tech companies. And this outage? Wow. It was a pretty stark reminder of just how connected and maybe how fragile our whole digital world has become. And the impact was felt everywhere. All of a sudden, you've got flights grounded at Heathrow Airport and for Alaska Airlines. People couldn't get to their money because NatWest Bank was offline. Even just going about your day, grocery shopping at Asda or Kroger or grabbing a coffee at Starbucks, total disruption. It hit government bodies like the Scottish Parliament, and of course Microsoft's own stuff, Office 365, Xbox, even Minecraft. It was a truly global mess.
All right, so let's get into the timeline of how this whole thing went down, because this wasn't just some minor glitch that got fixed in a few minutes. Nope, this was a prolonged worldwide failure.
So the clock starts at 1545 UTC. That's when services just started failing all over the planet. For 3 straight hours, things were completely broken. It wasn't until 1845 that Microsoft could even start trying to fix things by hand. By 21 o'clock, some services started flickering back to life, but it took a full 8+ hours for Microsoft to finally say, okay, we think we've fixed it. 8 hours of chaos. That is an eternity for businesses that rely on this stuff. Oh, and to make it all even crazier, to add a bit of corporate drama to the whole technical crisis, this entire meltdown happened just hours before Microsoft was set to announce its quarterly earnings. Talk about bad timing. You really couldn't write a more stressful script for a tech giant. So, what on earth could cause this massive digital domino effect? Well, it all boils down to one absolutely critical piece of their infrastructure and a single accidental change. The main culprit was a service called Azure Front Door, or AFD. The best way to think of it is like a super smart traffic cop for the internet. So when you try to visit a website or use a service that's hosted on Azure, AFD's job is to instantly point your request to the fastest, most reliable server anywhere in the world. It's absolutely crucial for making the modern web feel fast and responsive. And here is exactly how it all went so wrong. Step 1. Somebody pushed a single accidental configuration change to the whole Azure Front Door network. Now, you'd think there would be safeguards for this kind of thing, right? Well, there are supposed to be, but incredibly, those protection systems failed because of a software bug. They just didn't catch the error. So this faulty configuration spread like wildfire, causing all the individual traffic cops, the AFD nodes, to fail. They just couldn't load the new broken instructions. And from there, it was a cascade failure, leading to massive timeouts and errors for pretty much any service that relied on it. But here's the thing. This Azure outage wasn't some random, isolated event. To really get the full picture and its impact, you have to rewind the clock just 1 week. The timing here is just wild. 1 week, just 1 week before Azure went dark, Amazon Web Services, AWS, had its own massive outage. Now, the root causes were different, sure, it was DNS issues for AWS versus this configuration change for Azure. But the result? Exactly the same, widespread chaos. 1 week it's Slack and ChatGPT going down, the next week it's airlines and banks. These two back-to-back failures really pulled back the curtain on a pretty harsh reality about our digital world. In fact, the industry pretty much immediately started calling this period the week that shook the cloud. And for good reason. It was this huge wake-up call that maybe, just maybe, the foundations of our digital economy are way more fragile than any of us really thought.
And that really gets us to the core question. Why are these outages so incredibly devastating? Well, the answer really lies in the way the cloud market is structured. Just take a look at the global market share for cloud services. Amazon's AWS controls a third of the market, 32%. Microsoft's Azure has another 23%. So right there, you have 2 companies commanding over half of the entire market. You throw in Google Cloud, and now you're talking about 3 companies controlling nearly 2/3 of the entire foundation of our digital world. And this is put perfectly by Dr. Saqib Kakbi from Royal Holloway University. He says, economic forces lead to consolidation, but it is effectively putting all our eggs in one of 3 baskets. And as we just saw, when one of those baskets gets dropped, the consequences are absolutely enormous for everyone.
So as you can imagine, this week of utter chaos has led to some pretty urgent calls for reform from experts and leaders all across the industry. Nikki Stewart from the Open Cloud Coalition argues that the real problem here is the lack of competition. She says the solution isn't just about better technology, it's about creating a more open market where companies aren't just locked into one or two giant providers. For her, real strength, real resilience comes from having a genuine choice.
Then you've got Mark Boost, the CEO of Civo. He frames it as an issue of digital sovereignty. Basically, the idea that a country should be in control of its own digital future. He's asking, why are so many critical institutions relying on infrastructure that's hosted thousands of miles away? His solution is for governments to actually invest in their own domestic or sovereign cloud options to build up resilience at home.
And finally, Matthew Hodgson from Element offers a third and maybe more radical perspective. He argues that the fundamental problem is centralization itself, that any massive, centralized system is always going to have single points of failure. For him, the only way to get true resilience is to decentralize, to break up the cloud into smaller, independent, and self-hosted pieces.
So where do we go from here? Well, the calls to action are becoming pretty clear. Businesses need to think about diversifying. Regulators need to look at fostering more competition. And at the same time, there's this growing push to invest in both sovereign and decentralized models and to just make resilience a non-negotiable requirement right from the get-go, not something you think about after things go wrong.
At the end of the day, the week that shook the cloud did a lot more than just cause some temporary headaches. It has forced a critical and frankly long overdue conversation about the very foundations our entire digital society is built on.
So, we've built this incredible world that pretty much rests on a tiny handful of clouds. After seeing just how quickly they can all come tumbling down, the big question we're all left with is this: is it finally time to start building differently?